Lanette is a technical program manager with Media Alpha, which is a live auction insurance advertising platform. Is that right? Right?
Yes.
And you are a coder as well with extensive experience on testing side, which is really going to helpful for us today. And thank you for bringing that experience to this platform. And I really like that your strategies to use proven and practical methodologies that help teams implement a data-driven whole team approach. So I think multiple dimensions here, right? Whole team, data-driven, and more focus on delivering quality software consistently. So there are a lot of dimensions I think are here. So thank you for being here. And let me start with the questions. Leonard, just give me one sec. All right, so we are beginning. Just give me a thumbs up, please. Audience, just give me a thumbs up. And I start with the questions with Lynette. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks. I see lots of hands up. Great, great. So, Lynette, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So, first question, and that goes to your profile, which is what does a technical program manager do?
A technical program manager sits between engineering and the business. And a technical program manager is responsible for making the process go forward, for getting consensus about what we're building and why, and for making sure that we're delivering what the client needs. And it helps a lot if you have understanding of the code
Mhm.
and the product. It's not one or the other. You need to have both. It also involves a lot of testing. So I do a lot of testing myself. And one of the things I need to do is understand client APIs because my most recent role has been being in charge of API integrations. And what
Okay.
that means is we would meet with a customer, and they might be as small a customer as a one-person insurance office or as big as Geico and Progressive, so a really huge corporation.
Hmm.
And we need to deliver our data to their systems. And that means we need to be able to authenticate whatever protocol is used. We need to be able to reach out to them and integrate so they can use the data. And that means, they could have a very old format like a SOAP envelope in
Okay.
XML,
Uh-huh.
or it could be something they just built that has OAuth 2 and is pretty close to what we have had. And so it's all about what are we building as an engineering team and delivering it with quality, and then
Hmm.
confirming with that client, did we solve the entire problem? And then even asking them at the end, is there anything else we can do? Is there more data we can provide? So it's trying to deepen those client relationships by delivering a quality product.
Awesome, awesome. That's some interesting profile. At least based on my experience, this I have seen the program managers in a different role, but that's a good perspective that you bring on the table today. And thank you for that. Thanks,
Thanks.
Leonard. So, based on what you told me on what a program manager does, a technical program manager does, let me ask you the next question. And it's closely related to multiple profiles within same range, I would say. So the question is, what is the difference between a program manager, like technical program manager, like the role you do, a product manager, and a project manager?
Okay, I'll start with a project manager. Sorry to flip this around, but a project manager might be a contractor in charge of one project, and their goals are getting things delivered on time within the
Mhm.
budget. So it's a lot about understanding the business needs and the constraints we need to deliver within. So it's publishing calendars. A product manager is assigned to one product. So their product knowledge is going to be extensive, but it's all within one product. A
Mhm.
program manager is in charge of an ongoing program. that may span multiple products or be just a part of a product, but it's ongoing. So it's not a project or a product that may end. It's a program of delivering to people. So it basically, my job could change every week.
Okay.
And it also involves supporting the customers. The job is not over when we shipped an integration to a customer, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They can reach out to me at any time and say, I'm not seeing what I expect here. How can
Okay.
you help me, Lanette? And I'll need to go through. So in order to figure that out, I need to understand the code. So we wrote code in Perl, which I'd never used before. So I
Okay.
needed to learn how to read and understand Perl when I started this job.
Mm-hmm.
The core auction is all JavaScript. So understanding that logic, or who won what bid and why. I needed to understand the product UI, all the filters involved, so I could know what did they set? Does that correspond with their goals? And then also be able to do the SQL queries to see what data we had available. And does that data on our database match what they received? So after all of that, maybe I'll understand and be able to decide where should we make a fix and make sure it's not going to break anything else, retest that, and reconfirm with the client. So the
Mm-hmm.
main difference is it doesn't end. And the difference between a program manager and a technical program manager is about directly working with developers and understanding the code. So that's the main difference. Anyone can be a product manager who has great product knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and who is great with clients and can get those feedback loops going. But you can't really be a technical program manager if you don't understand the code and if you can't make decisions about how to fix problems that come up that are in the code.
Mm. Awesome.
That's
Awesome.
that's at least my experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the same at every single company. So there's going to be some context variation there.
Yes. Yes. Agree. Agree.
But
Totally makes
usually
sense.
they want you to understand the code and be a partner with development in delivery and support of a product over time.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Great. Thank you. I mean, that's very insightful answer. I would say, even to differentiate between a program manager and a technical program manager. So, thank you for that. And I think the audience here should also get some clarity. If you got some clarity, just give me a thumbs up, and to Leonard as well, so that we can come to know that okay, you got something out of these two questions to start with. Thank you. Oh, lots of love for you, Leonard
Oh,
here.
thank you.
That's great. Thank you for answering that. Okay, so now let's move to the next question. You ready for that, Leonard? Okay,
Yes, I think so. Unless someone has a follow up.
right. Just give me 1 second. I see something. Okay, so we have a related question, and that is putting on stage. Just give me 1 second. The question is, what does it take to be a product manager from being a tester? And it's from Amit K. He's a tester in Bengaluru. So, what does it take to be a product manager from being a tester? That's the question number one. The question number two is, do you suggest any career path to be a product owner, product manager?
I can say what it took for me
Mm-hmm.
and why I decided to move forward with it, but I think it varies company to company what they require. So I think being a tester is a great start because you're already thinking about what could go wrong and you're already thinking about how and practicing how do I isolate a problem and how do I communicate a bug without harming the relationship. And all of those skills transfer. All of those skills that you have as a tester for finding the smallest case that reproduces a problem, understanding where the problem is at, and understanding what risks might come with making a fix or a change. So I think testers are well positioned to move into those roles But there is one barrier, and that is you have to understand the code and be a partner with the developers in delivering things that clients want. So there's more interaction with clients that's necessary. At least
Hmm.
there was for me. I took a 9-month certification class to learn JavaScript,
Oh, okay.
and I did that on top of my regular job. And I know that's not an option for everybody, but it was an option for me. That wasn't easy, but I needed to, have more understanding of JavaScript and be more able to pick up different languages if I was going to be successful as a
Hmm.
technical program manager. And I feel like you don't need to be the best person at writing code, but you absolutely need to understand and read the code for most technical program managers' jobs. So it's because it's between we're also working with testers,
Hmm.
and I always appreciate great insight about what those risks might be, and we all need to collaborate together to make a good product. So I think testers absolutely are well positioned, and if you want to be a product manager, then there's things you need to understand, like personas, and you need to understand how are you going to map out what the goals are, how are you going to measure those goals for product success, and things about usability, and also making the UI something that people like. So you need to have
Hmm.
a broad skill set for that job. But I think testing kind of gets you started with it. And I like my testing background. I still test often.
Okay. Okay.
Even going through the code, I'm thinking about what problem could come up here,
Hmm.
and what do we want to clarify if there's any muddy requirements, because it's very costly,
Right.
to have a wrong idea on the requirements. So asking those clarifying questions, that's something testers do all the time. So I consider myself still a tester. I consider myself still a developer, and I'm also a technical program manager. So I enjoy doing all those things.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you for the detailed answer, Lynette. It was helpful. And I hope, Amit, you got the answer. And you can see on the screen a lot of love for you to get those insights bring on to the audience today. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Now, I guess it's a very good question that you can answer very well because you have gone through so many roles. Um, what are some commonly visible, to you at least, malpractices and misconceptions around agile and related frameworks?
I think one sort of fallacy is that you can just apply an agile framework and it will solve all of your problems. There's no silver bullet.
Hmm.
There's no process change that is entirely safe to um, take one of the frameworks. I've worked with a lot of teams that start with Scrum,
Hmm.
and I think Scrum is the lowest denominator of Agile. It's okay to start with, but I don't like it for mature teams
Hmm.
because the sprint planning takes so long and there's so much ceremony. I don't know if that's useful for a mature team. I kind of prefer the more lean, make all the work visible, make it all in one bucket, prioritize so you can see what you're working on. I do like the frequent in-person touch base kind of meetings. I think those are helpful for getting a team to be all on the same page and collaborate and help one another pass blocking problems.
Hmm.
But I like it when those meetings are short. I've seen malpractice when there's a team that's, so many people, and it just gets ridiculous, and it's not a 15-minute meeting anymore. It's like a whole hour of the day. I don't think that really serves anyone. And so I think if the process is too heavy for where the team's at, there's a lot of resistance, and that resistance makes sense to me. I like
Mm,
to do small experiments to find out what process works with the team, and I want to be the team people want to join because it's a happy place to work, and it's
yes.
the place where our time is not wasted with extra process. We have just at the minimal process that we need to help each other become more successful. So I think experimenting to find what that is for each team is better than just saying, "Oh, we're going with this framework and we're adopting all the ceremonies and we don't know why."
Right, right,
So
right. I
why are we using this process and these uh, ceremonies with these teams? If we know why, then it makes sense. But if we're just
mm,
doing them because that's what we know about Agile and our boss knows Scrum is Agile, that's not a very good reason.
thank
So,
you.
but
Yeah. Mhm.
sometimes you're going to do what the management picked. And in
Mm,
those cases, I think in such a competitive job market, they're going to lose developers, and that's expensive.
mm. Right, right. I think I can resonate with you on that. Like, if you're just doing for the sake of doing that because it is written without understanding the purpose and is it fitting to your team and context, it could be expensive for you, right? People may have a lot of resistance, still you're trying to impose on them, and then they're like, do you even know what you're talking about? And I'm done with this all that stuff, so I'm going somewhere else, right? I agree with you. I totally
There's a
thank you.
huge lack of engagement on some teams. And I
Hmm.
think the pandemic has made people step back and realize they don't want their time wasted. They want to make a difference. They want to do their best work. And it's hard to do that if you're being treated with a lack of autonomy. So I think everyone needs some autonomy and the ability to make decisions. I really think the team helps select the process, and that makes it easy for them to have buy-in because it's what they decided they want.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think this is where, I mean, just a follow up question on that from my side itself. This is where the whole concept of self organization of the teams come into picture, right? So you have to trust. I mean, I don't know if the hiring process is too much low on the standard, but assuming that you have hired right people, smart people on your team, you trust on them to be self organized with some coaching, molding, and training sessions, but then you say, okay, this is what a process looks like. As you mentioned, like Scrum is least common denominator, right? So you say, okay, this is what we're starting with. You are self-organized, we believe in your competency, we are coaching training for you. Now this is in your hands. Now you decide what to pick, what to change, and all these things, rather than saying we're in certain mode. Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for that answer. And I think it resonates with you, all the people here, that what she's saying is truth. I mean, rather fixating on a process, on the name of agile, just look at as a team what's happening, what is useful for you, what is making sense, what is fruitful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Next question for you, Leonard, is I think this is an old question, but I'm just putting it here. Businesses are more fault tolerant these days, right? It was not like initial. Still, there are businesses who are not fault tolerant, like avionics, insurance, and some life and safety critical, right? They could still be not fault tolerant, but there are other businesses that we see on in the world. They're more fault tolerant. How do you imagine the future of testing? Number one, and how do you imagine the future of dedicated testing groups? If that
I
question
don't
makes
think
sense.
that
Yeah.
I don't think that it's even in the future. I think as of now,
Mhm.
there are a lot smaller and fewer people doing testing. And by that, I mean there's more that are doing a mixture of development in terms of adding automated tests. I think we always need a human who can can think about new things and identify risks. That's something that we can't easily automate. We need a human for that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there will always be a role for people who are good at that, who are excellent at building up developers and seeing bugs fixed without bringing any negativity or conflict to that process. People who are both socially smart and smart at identifying risks, I think will always be part of the software process. Their title might change. They
Mm-hmm.
might be an analyst for one company. They might be a quality specialist for another company. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that skill set changes over time, maybe the titles change over time, but that function is still needed.
Mm-hmm.
The
Okay.
one difference I'm seeing though is working with more continuous feedback, working alongside with automation. So knowing what the unit tests are doing, making sure we're not duplicating any of that effort, understanding and owning part of the automation, but the developers also owning it, is something I've seen be successful at some places.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there will always be roles for testers on teams, but not necessarily giant groups of testers. That may be less of a trend we see.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. All right.
But
So.
I mean, there will still be cases. I worked in hospital data
Mm-hmm.
for a while, and that's something, a security breach is not a small matter. It's people's medical data. Also, there's testing for hardware and medical devices and airplanes where it's going to be regulated and you need to prove that those tests are done at all times. So that's going to require people too.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think it makes sense to understand in that perspective where, and I think it's more also about tester not only thinking of, oh, I'm a functional tester, I'm a GUI tester, I'm API specialist, I'm security specialist, and all these things. Yes, they're a specialist, but they need to think in what context they are working in, how the practices are being there. For example, some person is moving to product owner, so they are taking different role. So how you can combine and diversify to be inclusive rather than saying exclusively I'm this kind of tester, right? I think that could be more stability as well as progression predictable into their job role, right? Thank you for that.
Thanks.
I hope audience it's making sense all these questions and you're liking the answers by Leonard. If you just think, give thumbs and some love. Yeah, I see starting. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, let's move some fast. Um, so the next question is about um, it's a good question, I think. As you mentioned, as one question came up on can we move to the product owner, the similar question is about can we move to the scrum master role from a test if a tester is there and they want to move to scrum master role. So would you like to guide on some initial steps if you want to?
I've only worked in that capacity one time,
Uh-huh.
and it is not my favorite role, and I'll explain why. I
Okay.
think that as far as being a scrum master and having that role, absolutely, I think a tester would be well placed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is a lot of the people who are hiring for a scrum master role don't know what they're looking for.
Hmm.
And most of the time, the requirements and the interview process doesn't match the actual job. So it's extremely difficult. I feel like people who have more of a coding background are going to have the advantage.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And there's also the fact that everyone who they hire, they want to already have experience. And so, what I think might be useful is to get a good understanding of Agile and work on a few different Agile teams as a tester, and then see if there's a small business or a nonprofit where some experience can be gained. So
Oh.
maybe it's just on a very small, so maybe that's not your primary job, but you need a way to get some experience, because I've not seen a lot of roles where they just hire a scrum master who doesn't have experience already. So I think that's a chicken and the egg problem. So figuring out like, okay, how can I just get one project under my belt so I have some experience and some good stories to tell as a scrum master?
Hmm.
I don't think it should be that way. I think our interview process and the job posting process is pretty broken in general,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know of a way without that experience to get the opportunity.
Hmm. Okay.
So I think you would have to build up some experience, and that's not easy to do.
Okay.
But I think testers would be very good scrum masters, especially if they're trying to put the process in place slowly with
Hmm.
experiments to make sure they're fitting and actually helping the team achieve their goals.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Leonard. Thanks for that answer. Appreciate that. Uh, okay, let's move towards the automation space now after some talks about
Okay.
agile project
Yeah.
manage, right? So the next question to you is this: with the fast pace of these agile deliveries, right? Do you think automation can keep the pace? And a follow-up question on that is, do you think that in sprint automation is a myth, or or is it, can this be actually achieved? I think that's a question that a lot of people ask within the teams, outside the teams, and especially people who are in automation. Like, what are you talking about? Let's say as a part of definition of done, like in sprint automation, but then you have 2 weeks and then changing requirements and code and all that stuff, right? So, and I think question is very common sense. Hey, is it achievable, or is you're just talking just because of talking? What's your opinion on that?
So I think it is achievable, and I've seen it done
Oh.
to some level. But it depends, what level of done are you talking about? Are you talking about getting tests in place that prove those features that were defined work? Yes, that is possible. Because if you begin the automation at the start of the sprint when a lot of your features aren't ready to test, then you get the tests in place. Well, the way I've seen it done, and it's been a while, was at the place I worked that had hospital data. And the reason why they had in sprint automation is because it was part of the engineering process, and the engineers and the testers were both responsible for it. So before a ticket ever went into being in process at all, it
Hmm.
was already known what tests did it need to pass, where
Oh.
they would be automated. Everything in the fixture that needed to be done would be part of the story. But what that doesn't tell you is, have you broken things behind you? You only have covered what's in the story. So I
Right,
still
right.
feel you need exploratory testing charters, and you need to understand what features are critical to ship, and that automation and or testing. Some testing needs to be done once. Sometimes it needs to be done multiple times. So it really depends on what the test is. But I think I have seen in sprint automation work, and I've also seen it done with exploratory charters that cover the broader things, like what is the user experience? What is the
Hmm.
performance like? Is it
Right.
degrading?
Hmm.
Do we actually support people with disabilities? Do we have reasonable errors when things don't work how we expect? All of those things still matter.
Right, right.
So we might be able to cover exactly what's in the stories in a sprint, but we certainly have not automated all testing, and those aren't the same thing.
Hmm. Right.
So you can't cover every single test that you would regularly do in a sprint, but you can cover what's required in each story in each sprint if you have engineering buy-in and
Hmm.
if it blocks the definition of done. If you're not done without the automation and the engineers know that and are required to help make that happen, it will happen. But that
Okay.
requires a lot of buy-in, and the automation has to be as important as the code to the definition of done. I don't know too many teams that have set that up.
Yep.
And for that reason, it will remain a myth. So if it's not important enough to block the sprint definition of done, then it's not going to happen.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
As
And
far as like, it's pretty
yeah,
hard,
yes.
but
Yes.
it is
Yes.
possible.
Right. Right. And I see a thumbs up coming up for you for that answer, I guess, because I think that makes sense that it has to be planned, it has to be thoughtful. It should not be like afterthought of everything else. So people out there, if that answer makes sense to you as well, it resonates with your own stories, with your questions, just just give Leonard some thumbs up, not me. So yeah, I see a couple of thumbs up coming for you, Leonard. Thank you for that. Um, we'll move a little bit faster now. How can agile teams better cater to a problem of delayed builds to testing team in sprints? The question on the screen. So it's more
Oh,
about.
that's an awesome question. Okay. I think that this is something that can be solved only by those above the engineering team, by them being willing to make some kind of guidelines and a culture of checking in code
Mhm,
so that it can be mobbed, so that there can be pair programming if needed. Also, it's about code review, that things are properly code reviewed in a constructive way without slowing everybody down. The code review has to be as important as writing the code in the
hmm,
engineering culture. And then also having a good continuous integration system or build system, whether you have that just generating builds with each change or you just have one or two builds a day, it's
mhm,
having that consistently be available and of a certain quality that you can actually test it. So if somebody checks in a code that's going to delay a build to testing, their change should be rolled back and punted out all the way back to the next sprint if they're going to interrupt the flow of delivery, unless it's important enough that they're willing. So if it's important enough that it would block a demo happening, then
mhm,
it needs to be raised in the meeting, in the stand-up meeting, and multiple people need to get on working on that as if it is an emergency because it's
hmm,
literally blocking delivery and it should be treated as such.
hmm.
So it should not be okay to not check in your code for multiple days or to work on this side branch for the entire sprint and then dump it in at the end.
Okay.
That's very sloppy engineering practice.
Mhm,
A tester can't do much about that, but
mhm,
you're going to have a problem with build consistency if that sort of thing is not cleaned up. And by cleaned up, I mean people being coached. They need to feel comfortable to check in their code when it's not perfect with the idea that finding problems so we can fix them is what we do together.
okay.
And so
Okay.
there should be no embarrassment about anyone making a mistake, whether it be a
Right.
developer or a tester. Everyone makes mistakes. We need to have the attitude of we're going to help each other clean up these mistakes so our delivery is clean.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you.
So
Thank
if
you for
you
that.
have that
Yeah.
kind of culture and
Mhm.
people are checking in their code regularly, the builds will improve.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you, Leonard. Thank you for that. And I think there's a follow-up question on that. I think Ashutosh is posting here. Thank you, Rama Lakshmi, Dinesh, QA engineer, QST Bangalore, um, asking, can you explain your experience on Agile? Will you discuss any issue that you have faced and how did you solve that issue in your current role?
Okay, so I my favorite type of agile is what I call the type of agile you don't discuss. If you
Okay.
have to talk about agile process, that's a waste of time. Don't talk about it, be about it. Actually do something and measure the progress. How did it go? Like there's nothing to talk about, but there's a lot of things to try in with agile process. It's not something I feel like there's all this talk about what we're gonna do, and very little follow-up about actually doing it. So I don't like to argue with people about it. I like to find one enthusiastic participant and get started. So I try and bring in who's ready to make things better, who's ready to work together and make a small experiment and see if things get better or not. Because I found if you just start, a lot of people are willing to join you if they see a group of people willing to help themselves and work is getting more consistent and better. Eventually, people will want to be on a team that has practices that help each other
Yes,
and a
exactly.
good culture of trust. And um, that's really the point: is what are we building towards? What's the vision? So basically, I don't worry about people who don't want to participate. I'm focused on the people who do.
Awesome.
I don't
Awesome.
like to spend my time beating my head against a brick wall. I want to leave the brick wall where it's at and build around it.
Awesome, awesome, great. Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. That's let's not talk about it. Do it, and then experiments, and let's see who are involved and solve the problem. Look at the vision, what the product is, and helping building that. Thank you, thanks, Len. Ramalakshmi, I hope you get your answer, and I think it has been useful for all of us who are here. If you can show some thumbs up or love, that I would know it was helpful. Uh, Okay, awesome, great. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Leonard. Okay, next question um, about the selection of programming language for automation projects. What's your opinion on that? We will go some quickly here on some of the
Yeah,
questions.
well, my understanding is that you need to be able to automate in the language and the tools that the developers on the team use. Because I think the developers are as important to the automation being successful as are testers. I think
Right.
it's a collaborative job. The whole team's responsible for that automation. And I find it much easier if I'm using the same tools and language as the developers to show them a problem and get answers and get unblocked on both sides. So that means using uh, kind of what the main language is on your team. So
Hmm.
maybe it's Python for a project, maybe it's JavaScript for another project. I think understanding how programming works and being able to read the code of multiple languages is easier once you have experience in one language.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
But I mean, I don't know how important it is because it depends what team you're working on. You're going to have to learn the language that your team sees as their primary automation language. So, um, what is the language that applies to your job? It's not the same answer for everyone. Or if you really want to work on a certain area or a certain team, like let's say that you really want to work on iOS apps. So you're going to have a different answer than if you're going to be doing cross browser testing.
Hmm. Hmm, hmm. Okay. Okay. Get it. Thank you. Thanks, Leonard.
Thanks.
Uh, Next question on BDD frameworks. So the question is this: do you find BDD frameworks out there actually empowering business analysts to automate? And second question on that is this an effective approach when working in an agile setup?
Um, so I think any tool that allows business analysts to contribute and demonstrate what they want to see is helpful to the agile setup because it gives us information, more information about what the desired work is. But I think it's in addition to testing that we already do and automation that we already have. So those tools make sense that they're more visual for those with business expertise and are less technical. But under the covers, you still need to understand how those tools work to get past the problems with them in many cases. And there's still limitations. So I don't think the work that business analysts do with those tools is the same work that a quality specialist would do with those tools. So I think, once again, it depends on the context, but I see it giving away a chance for those business analysts to contribute with more examples, and that's a positive for everybody.
Okay. Okay.
So
Awesome.
it's more, they can deliver a functional prototype or something that we all can come to agreement on. Instead of just a static description or a roadmap, you get something you can put your hands on and figure it out. But it doesn't necessarily mean those tools can replace all of the automation and the test thought that have been put in place by the people on the team who work on quality.
Hmm. Okay.
I
Okay.
see it as additional, not as a
Additional.
replacement.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Next question would be very interesting. How do you see the no code, low code side of automation tools? Would they increase their user base rapidly in the coming time? The low
I
code and no
think
code.
that they will increase some in the time, but I still think testers are going to need to understand code to do a good job and understand the changes and the risk that are coming into the product. So that product knowledge and the knowledge of how the code is changing is still going to be important to testing. But I do see those tools taking some of the work that they're better at away. So I see that they have a contribution to make, and that more teams might pick them up for what they're good at. But I also think it's interesting to look into the limitations. Um,
Hmm.
the tools out there that are not no code, low code support more programming languages for what I've seen. And
Hmm.
so it's going to depend a little bit on what language the team uses, which tools are appropriate to use.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Get it. Get it. Thank you. Thanks for that, Lynette. Um, okay. So next question is about Selenium. So uh, web automation is largely dominated by Selenium, for a couple of years now, right? And it continues across. However, in recent times, it's Cypress and Playwright recently, they are getting popularity, right? So do they have it in them to become an alternative of Selenium? What do you think on that?
I think they have the potential to,
Hmm.
but they aren't there yet. And part of the reason is the variety of support for various programming languages is not necessarily there yet.
Hmm.
And the tools don't necessarily work in every browser. And so, just like Selenium has supported more over time, I think as those visual tools are able to support more over time, they might be able to broadly replace what Selenium's capabilities are. But at this
Hmm.
point, it's comparing apples and oranges. It's not the same.
Okay.
Um, I love anything that makes it possible for business users to do testing, and I get excited about that. And I feel like I want it to be better for anyone to join in testing and to be effective quickly. So I like that. I like the ability to easily test out what's worth automating, what am I getting good knowledge from. I love that being a low barrier to entry,
Hmm.
but I don't see, until the broad support that Selenium has for all the browsers and also all the languages, there's no way it could be replaced so easily in every context. So
Okay.
I hope it happens. I hope that they succeed and the tools can do more and more over time. But I think for a lot of contexts, they can't, Selenium can't be replaced right now.
Hmm. Okay.
Just as far as the diversity of what you can do with it, and the breadth of what you can test and how you can write the code, I think it applies to a lot of different scenarios.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I think it's a kind of relief for people who are in Selenium, but at the same time, a message that different tools may come in the market. Probably look at your use case, look at your context, look at what kind of testing you want to do, and just go on with any tool you want. But Selenium is going to stay for some time at least, because the support and the diversification and the breadth of the application that it can automate. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I would say the last question until there is a follow-up question, and I
Yeah.
think it's a fantastic question for you as well, because you do a lot of stuff on API side. So I've chosen this question to be at
Yes.
last. Okay, so what's the best way to mock the downstream API layer for UI automation cases? And is it even worth the effort, since it needs constant maintenance as per downstream behavior API changes? What do you think on that?
So I've done most of my API testing using Postman and PAW. So that means not going through the UI. So maybe I don't understand why someone is going through the UI all the time in testing the API, because at the low level, I think most of the testing is more functional testing. So maybe I haven't run into that case where it's about the UI. So I'd be interested in hearing from someone else what the need is that they're addressing by going through through the UI in this case, instead of testing the API more directly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in addition to testing the API, part of that is also testing the documentation for the API.
Hmm.
I notice a lot of documentation not being tested, and I always hope that we testers are going to improve at making sure that the documentation is useful to people who want to interact with that API in the future.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Thanks, Leonard.
So I'm sorry if I don't have a clear answer on that. I've done a ton of API testing, but no one's wanted it to really go through the UI.
Right. Right.
And so I haven't had to face that challenge, and I don't really understand why going through the UI would be a good plan.
Right. So let us people come for with that counter question of you, because
Yeah.
that's also a good thing, that if you don't understand the question, we can say, okay, why is that so? What exactly you want to achieve? Okay. So Leonard, we are done with our
Okay.
pre questions. So, but there are questions from the audience, and one question
Great.
is, with current technology trend like blockchain and Web 2, how we need to adopt our testing strategy. uh, is it going to a bigger change and bring new job roles? What do you think of that? Blockchain and Web 2.
I think it's very interesting that so I when I in trying to understand what is so valuable about blockchain, and also what's going on with NFTs, I'm confused because it seems like there's so many scams and there's so many things that are not true that are said about it. I don't know. I think until they figure out a use case that's a pervasive problem that's being solved, besides just doing unethical things,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Right now, I think there's so many scams and things that are not true. It's
Hmm.
extremely difficult to predict what's going to happen. It seems kind of like a combination of the stock market and the dark web, what I've read about it so far. Like, it's not, I think that there's a lot of criminal stuff going on right now that
Hmm.
are using the technology, and it's giving legitimate uses a bad name.
Hmm.
So I would say it's still on the fringes, at least. Companies want to do NFTs and earn money and have uh, their content protected. And I think there are some uses, but I also read about it, and a lot of it seems to be financial scams. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure that it's really stable or that we've seen what it's going to become in the useful parts yet.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
I don't know, and
Okay.
I've been concerned when I've looked into it, is what I'd say about it. I
All
don't
right.
work with any companies who are actively in that space.
Okay.
Um, I know it's growing. I'm aware of it, but so far I'm weary about the level of scams that are going on.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you. And that's a nice, I would say that's a thoughtful answer, rather than just jumping on some other solutions. Thank you. Thank you for that. One question. Oh, it's from Mahesh Chikne. He's founder of the Test Tribe, I guess. Yeah, he's. So the question is, the testing teams are shrinking, as you rightly pointed out in one of our previous question. But then, where are the testers who are leaving these teams are going? Where are they? Any prime transition trend that you see, Lynette, on that?
Yeah, I see a lot of people who are, educating themselves and going back to learn more on the coding side.
Hmm.
And I've even seen some people go back, learn Python, and get into machine learning, or go back and say, okay, I'm going to work on continuous integration. This is my specialty now. And they might also go back and say, okay, I want to be a specialist in DevOps. So I'm seeing people being willing to do more programming and work in aiding developers in different ways and specializing in more of the niche development. There's
Hmm.
also some people who are becoming specialists in development frameworks that end up going to developer roles. I wish it was an easier transition for people to make. Right now, it's expensive, and I don't think the barrier to entry is the same for everyone. I'd like us to be more equitable and give anyone with the desire the chance to pick up those skills and practice them and get some experience. I think open source has some opportunities for people to practice in new programming languages, and I've noticed the developer community is helpful for
Hmm.
people getting started. If you put a question out there, I've worked with maybe, I'd have to say, at least 10 different people from around the world have been willing to pair with me when I'm learning uh, new skills in a new programming language. That's been very helpful. And so I think that the assistance is there for the asking,
Thanks, Leonard. This is kind of done with the questions, with the follow-up questions, with the audience question. Thank you very much. I would like to have audience to give a big round of applause for Leonard for being here today, answering so thoughtfully, and so that we are thinking on ourselves what's happening there, rather than having straight answers like checklist kind of thing. But it's more about thoughtful answers given by Leonard. Thanks, Leonard. Thanks for your time
Thank you.
today.